Fluttershy. I'm trying to do an intro here. Anyway, how's it going, my buffalo? pikafan003 here, and today we will be doing yet another 5 chapters in A Somber Year. I'm sorry. Well, in the last 5, I did a wasabi challenge, and if you didn't see that, go watch it. All I'll say is earthy. That's what the wasabi was. Earthy. But anyway, without further process, we shall be continuing on with 5 chapters, starting from 21, ending on 25. So let's get that underway. Warning: torture, disturbing imagery, blood, and a very sadistic twilight. Alright. The castle gave off a foreboding sense of dread the closer both Rarity and Trixie got, both unicorns only fixing their eyes on the ancient black structure embedded into the mountain face. The steps leading up to the main entrance. I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble reading. Okay, a pair of large double doors with vine-like patterns carved into it seemed to go on forever. The night went on like normal. By now, the moon was midway into the starry sky, obscured by clouds as they tore away from the large white sphere in the sky. Rarity wanted to go home. She missed her friends, her family, Spike. She couldn't help but wonder how the baby dragon was holding up. She didn't regret telling him about her secret mission before she went off for training. It was enough to ease the little dragon into knowing why she would be gone for a while. She honestly didn't know how long she would have been gone if she wasn't in this situation right now. The white unicorn suddenly heard huffing beside her and turned to notice that Trixie was slowing down, huffing and panting as though she had just finished a marathon. "Trixie," she whispered low enough for the blue unicorn to hear. The blue unicorn raised one ear up slightly before turning her entire head to look at Rarity with droopy eyes. "What?" she whispered back, sounding as though she could drop at any minute from exhaustion. "Don't give in," Rarity said. "You must stay strong. You have to find a way to endure whatever Somber has in store for us." "Easy for you to say," Trixie grumbled as she struggled to stay awake. "Hey, hurry up, you two!" Brayburn snapped at them, clearly looking impatient. Rarity shot the stallion a stare, but wisely said nothing in retaliation. "Rarity," Trixie gasped, her legs beginning to wobble, the chains not helping one bit. Rarity immediately got to her side to stable her walking. A hint of a smile appeared on Trixie's lips, for once showing gratitude towards something. They soon arrived at the castle. The double doors opened with a loud groan. Both unicorns suddenly cried out in surprise when sacks were suddenly placed over their heads. Both of them screamed, only to be told to shut up by Brayburn. Rarity felt herself being torn away from Trixie's side and started to struggle in her chains. "Rarity! Rarity!" Trixie cried frantically as the guards led her into the opposite direction. "Trixie!" Rarity cried back. "Trixie!" Trixie's voice suddenly seemed very distant. Rarity was panicking so much that she couldn't concentrate hard enough to use her magic. She was clueless as to where the guards were leading her. Everything was dark, mixed in with blurred glows from what she believed to be candles. She couldn't make out the moonlight that shone through the large arched windows to her right. Rarity gasped frightfully when she heard a door open, and she found herself walking down a spiral staircase. She squeaked in fear when she heard the door slam close behind her, and it echoed eerily around her. Again, I'm sorry for my stutters in my reading. Anyway. She nearly fell forward once they reached the bottom, having not noticed the last step. Luckily, she managed to catch herself in time before one of the guards barked at her to keep walking. She hadn't known how long she'd been walking until she heard what sounded like another door open. She cried out when she was suddenly shoved in and fell to the cold floor. Panic started to fill her when she suddenly heard the door close behind her and frantically tried to get on her hooves. "Wait! Aren't you going to remove the sack? Come back!" she cried. It didn't even take Rarity a second to realize she was now alone. She couldn't help but think about Trixie. She wondered where the blue unicorn was. She didn't expect them to separate them. The white unicorn was then swallowed nervously. She has a feeling that this is something far more than just an interrogation. This isn't the kind of the reunion I had in mind. This isn't the kind of reunion I had in mind, a voice suddenly purred. I'm sorry, I had to reread that. Rarity froze. She didn't even hear them come in. "Who's there?" she called. There was a soft, faux gasp that soon followed. "Rarity, I'm hurt. How could you not recognize my voice?" The entire cell suddenly fell completely silent. So silent that one could hear a pin drop. Twilight smirked and slammed the door shut behind her before using her magic to lock it, grinning when she saw her former friend flinch in reaction to it. "But no matter," she then giggled. "It'll make things much more fun for me." "What?" Rarity wanted to ask before she suddenly felt herself being lifted off the floor and suddenly slammed onto what she guessed was a chair, her front hooves being forcefully chained from behind. The white unicorn gasped for air as soon as the sack was removed and the dim glow of a torch greeted her. It took a full minute for her mind to finally settle down after all the thoughts that were frantically rushing through ceased. "Oh my, you haven't changed a bit, Rare. Is that a new haircut? Oh no, wait. No, it's not. It's still sticking to the pathetic curls as always," Twilight tisked in the darkness. "Who are you?" Rarity snapped, her voice quivering. "Show yourself, you coward!" In the blink of an eye, Rarity suddenly received a sharp slap, a stinging feeling that lingered on her now red cheek. Rarity fought back the tears that threatened to fall and desperately wanted to caress the red mark, but she couldn't even move her hooves. "There, now that finally shut you up," her attacker said. Rarity narrowed her eyes in the direction of the voice and felt a rage beginning to ignite in her, a rage she never felt before in her life until now. No ponies ever slapped her before, nor did she ever think it would happen. As a foal, her parents would often discipline her by taking away her dress-up kit and sending her to her room for a few hours. It seemed like nothing now, but it certainly did the trick. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice cracking slightly. A giggle answered her, followed by a wicked cackle. "How long has it been? A year? 2? Oh, I don't know. I've not been keeping track as of late, but perhaps an adorable egghead like myself would have known anyway." Then it hit her. Rarity felt her lips quiver and she suddenly found herself lost for words as the captor finally stepped out of the shadows, revealing an armored alicorn. Despite all of the changes in her appearance, Rarity immediately recognized the smile on her face. The same one she would have seen every day whenever she and their friends met up. "Twilight Sparkle?" she asked softly. Twilight's right eye twitched at the mentioning of her former name, but managed to maintain her current composure. "It's Twilight Terror now, Rarity. Sparkle doesn't sound all that threatening or foreboding," she said, talking to her in the fashion she used to do when they were friends. "No, it can't be," she heard Rarity suddenly whisper. "Pardon?" Rarity looked up with a sullen, confused expression. "We all thought you were dead. We saw the tower crumble before our own eyes. We didn't think any pony would have survived. Twilight narrowed her eyes at the unicorn with burning contempt. "So that's why none of you came to my rescue, because you all thought I was fucking dead," she screamed, angrily stomping her hoof on the floor, leaving a small dent. Rarity pressed herself back against the chair in pure horror when she noticed her eyes suddenly glow green with purple smoke coming out from the corners, reminding her a lot of Sombra. "Twilight," she said shakily, "why are your eyes like that? What did Somber do to you?" A dark smirk appeared on Twilight's face as she glared wickedly at Rarity. "He helped open my eyes, that's what," she said as she walked over to the wooden table hidden in the shadows. "He made me realize that you and the others care nothing for me, that all of you abandoned me because of all the danger I put every pony through." Twilight spoke softly as she looked through the variety of knives and other tools with a half-lidded gaze. Rarity gave her corrupted friend a quizzical look. "What? We didn't abandon you. We would Don't say it!" Twilight suddenly screamed. "Don't fucking say it!" Rarity immediately shut her trap and merely looked at the alicorn with a frightened look. Just what did Somber do to the friendly, book-loving unicorn she once knew? More so, how the hell did she become an alicorn? Twilight must have gone through some serious business in order to earn her wings. Twilight seemed to calm down a bit, and she turned back to the table, hovering her hoof just above the tray of tools. Now, going back to that sentence, serious business in order to earn her wings, wasn't it Rarity in the Season 3 finale that said she didn't know such a thing was possible, turning a unicorn into an alicorn? Or even a Pegasus like Cadence was? Anyway. "What's your greatest fear, Rarity?" Twilight asked as she examined the knife casually before placing it back on the tray. "What?" Rarity asked, her voice quivering. "Don't tell me you fear nothing now. Every pony has something they fear, whether it's death or rejection." Twilight swung her head over to the unicorn and gave her a disappointed look. "Seriously, Rare, I expected better of you." Rarity narrowed her eyes and frowned. Twilight saw this and laughed, her cold voice bouncing off the stone walls of the cell. She picked up a scalpel and happily twirled it back to Rarity with an excited smile on her face. "We're gonna have some fun," she giggled happily, sounding more like an excited filly than anything else. Rarity's eyes widened with horror as a creepy, wide crescent-shaped grin slowly stretched itself across the alicorn's face, while her irises shrunk to the size of marbles. "I am going to enjoy breaking the likes of you," she said in a slow, ominous tone that would have made foals cry. Rarity gulped and began to struggle weakly in her chains. She threw her head back as far as she could and shrieked when she felt a sudden pain in her skull, barely catching a glimpse of Twilight's curved horn glowing a dark aura as she cast a spell on her. "Go to sleep, Rarity," the mare cooed. "Oh, well, that must be a reference to Jeff. Jeff the killer. You know, the go to sleep." Rarity's world went black after that. Rarity found herself surrounded by a crowd of ponies, royals to be exact. The mare watched anxiously as Celestia examined the dress she had worked so very hard to make for her. The alicorn suddenly looked over her shoulder and, to her surprise, glared at her with disgusted eyes. "This dress is a disaster," she spat, taking Rarity by complete surprise and causing her to recoil back in fear. Celestia used her magic to tear the dress before her eyes, before having the shredded cloth rain over the white unicorn. "You call that a dress? This is perhaps the worst excuse of a dress I've ever seen." Rarity looked up at Celestia with frightened, sorrowful eyes. "I'm sorry, Princess. I don't know what went wrong. I followed your request exactly as you said." Celestia snorted and rolled her eyes, as if annoyed. Around her, Rarity noticed that the ponies were laughing at her rather mockingly and cruelly, calling her names that shouldn't even be said to a mare. Rarity sniffled and felt herself close to tears as the laughter grew colder and colder, as the insults slowly turned into death threats. "Stop it, please!" she screamed, clutching her head with both of her hooves in an effort to block out the laughter and threats. She then looked up at Celestia with pleading eyes. "Please, give me a second chance, Princess. I'll try harder, I promise." "Don't make promises you're not going to keep, Rarity." The princess spat Rarity's name as though it were a bad taste in her mouth. She then turned and left, leaving Rarity at the mercy of the crowd. "Princess, wait!" Rarity cried, reaching out for the Alicorn princess as the crowd viciously forced her on her back, allowing the males to surround her and give her sinister, hungry looks. Rarity screamed as they came for her. Rarity's eyes snapped open and she screamed herself awake, only to scream louder when she felt Twilight suddenly run a scalpel down her cheek, swiftly leaving a thin, bleeding cut behind. "Aw, what's the matter, Rarity?" Twilight asked in a mock, concerned voice. "Did you have a bad dream?" Rarity found herself panting and in tears. She let out another scream when she felt Twilight carve the outline of a heart around her cutie mark, digging into her fragile skin and causing some blood to leak out. She whimpered when Twilight suddenly brought her face up to hers, that psychotic look still present as she held the slightly bloody blade directly in between her eyes. Rarity could only wince in disgust and horror as she slowly ran her tongue up to the bloody blade. Twilight said fondly as she licked her lips of any blood that remained, savoring its taste. "Your blood tastes like sweet sugar mixed with honey." She gave Rarity a sadistic look. "I must simply try more." Now, sugar mixed with honey. I thought Rarity tasted like marshmallows. Anyway. Rarity didn't even have a second to protest before she felt an agonizing pain coming from the right side of her flank. Twilight carved an even deeper heart shape around her cutie mark, sucking and licking the blade as though it were a popsicle. Ugh, that's creepy. She giggled when she saw the look on Rarity's face and expertly wiped her tongue around the cold metal. "If I were a vampire, I would have sucked you dry by now," she purred. "Twilight," Rarity whimpered, "why are you doing this?" But instead of answering, Twilight simply grabbed her skull and yanked her forward until the tips of their noses were touching. "Are you grateful for the life you have, Rarity?" she asked slowly. "What does that have to do with—" "Ah!" she screamed when she felt Twilight's grip tighten. "Yes!" she whimpered. Twilight then laughed a bone-chilling laugh. "Oh, you're such a poor liar, Rarity," she said fondly as she walked over to the tray of tools, setting the scalpel down to pick up a bigger knife instead. She held the knife up to Rarity's face for her to get a better look. The white unicorn could only shiver in intense as she gazed at her slightly distorted reflection in the stainless steel blade. "You're just like every other pony who lied and betrayed me. And now, I finally have a chance to start my revenge." Without warning, she dug the tip of the knife into the thin cut she left on Rarity's cheek earlier and viciously pulled down, replacing the thin cut with an open gash. Rarity screamed in sheer agony, finding it hard to do so without having to stretch her mouth. She felt the muscles still holding her cheek together pull each time she moved her jaw, her salty tears causing it to sting in pain. Ooh, that does sound very painful. Twilight laughed in sadistic amusement, giving her former friend a gloating look before bringing the knife over to the heart outline around both her cutie marks and did the same thing. The Alicorn let out a soft, shaky moan, fueled by Rarity's screams and pleas as she maimed her. She even laughed in sheer delight when she got some blood on her, lapping most of the blood off the knife. Twilight returned to the tray of tools and placed the knife down. Rarity weakly lifted her head up to see her picking up an old-looking hacksaw. The white unicorn swallowed swallowed hard as sinister possibilities rushed through her head. Twilight noticed the fearful expression on her face and giggled playfully. "Twilight, please," Rarity whimpered as she wept quietly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened to you. We didn't know. Honest." Twilight silenced her with a harsh slap across her wound. Rarity cried louder from the pain as her cheek swelled. "Shut that fucking trap of yours before I decide to saw off one of your limbs. Which is actually something I plan to do later. But first, I want to see you break." Twilight then viciously grabbed her horn and placed the hacksaw against it. Wow. That's dark. Anyway, Rarity's eyes widened with horror when she desperately tried to shake her head. No, she pleaded repeatedly. No, please don't do this, Twi. This isn't like you, Rarity pleaded frantically. But it only motivated Twilight to proceed what she was about to do. In rapid movement, the alicorn proceeded to saw her horn off, pumping her arm as fast as she could to dig the blade through the rough horn. Ow! Rarity wailed for Twilight to stop. Attempting to move or shake her head would result in another slap across her open wound. Already her cheek was swollen to the point she couldn't even move her jaw anymore. There was a loud crack before she felt her horn suddenly being pulled off her head. She then gasped in horror when Twilight showed her her severed horn. Okay, my OC's a Pegasus. I would shriek in horror if I saw my wings dangling in front of me. That's just sheer horror. "I think I'll keep this as a trophy," Twilight said as she examined the white horn. "Plus, I'm getting very tired. I used up most of my strength earlier for my beloved king." Twilight giggled at the fond images in her head. Fond? She then gave Rarity a sadistic grin before walking out of the cell and slamming the door behind her, leaving Rarity to sob and cry as blood and tears rained down her face. Trixie hugged her knees against her chest after hearing Somber close and lock the door behind him, tears pouring down her face as she whispered repeatedly to herself, saying, "Stop it," over and over again as images from her nightmare lingered in her fragile mind. "I have to get out of here," she thought. I have just enough strength to find Rarity and get us back to Ponyville at least. It's not safe for us here anymore." As Trixie shakily got back on all fours, she threw up. The nightmare Somber forced her to endure for what felt like hours took a major toll on her. Using her wrist to wipe a bit of vomit off her mouth, she concentrated on getting Rarity. During her torture, she had heard her anguished screams outside her cell. Mustering all of her remaining strength, Trixie prepared to teleport to Rarity's location. "Hang on, Rare," the blue unicorn grunted weakly, struggling to even stand. "I'm coming to the rescue, and I'm getting us the hell out of here." She teleported. Chapter 21 over. I almost said chapter 6 or 16, I don't know. But, little footnote. Normally, I don't write physical torture, but it was necessary for this chapter. Sorry, Rarity. Now, North Gallus 2002 replied with, "Thank you so much, and don't worry, answers to your questions will come eventually. And yay, cupcakes. Hopefully they're not Pinkie Pies." Well, cupcakes isn't even Pinkie Pie in the first place, it was Pinkamena. Anyway, Lucifera replied with, "Hope you liked this chapter, and don't send Nightmare Moon after me." Princess Midnight Moon replied, "Thanks." Miss Moonshoes Potter replied, "Yeah, sorry if the psychological torture was bad." Fan replied, "Here's the reveal. and Wildheart 1997 replied, "Thanks, I hope this chapter's good." Anyway, on to chapter 22. No warning for this one. So, Princess Celestia sighed softly as she finished the last of her paperwork for the morning. She had hoped it would take her mind off of Rarity and Trixie, but it wasn't enough. She's worried for the both of them. It's only been 3 days since their capture, thus today would be marking the 4th. The Alicorn stood up from her throne and walked over to one of the stained glass windows depicting the elements of harmony defeating Nightmare Moon. Her eyes trailed off to the small image of Twilight's sparkle. A tear rolled down her face as she thought about the young unicorn. She missed her so much. The Alicorn Princess found herself unable to remove her dead student from her mind. When she saw something that reminded her of Twilight, it would bring back memories of the days before the incident in the Crystal Empire, before King Somber's return, back when everything was just right in Equestria. There was the incident with Discord and the Changelings, yes, but all of that had been taken care of with the elements. Save for the Changelings, that was Shining Armor and Cadence, not the elements. I should have known, Celestia whispered to herself, closing her eyes as tears proceeded to roll down her cheeks. Oh, Twilight, I should have seen this coming. King Somber was just too powerful for you. I should have gone instead. Or perhaps I should have sent Luna with all of you. Okay. The Alicorn sighed sadly and turned away from the window and slowly walked back to her throne. So, going back to that, or perhaps I should have sent Luna with all of you. Did she want Luna to go instead because she's still selfish? Or starting to become selfish, I mean? Because Celestia was never selfish. In fact, I think one of the elements that she portrayed was generosity, but that could have been Luna. I don't know. Princess? Celestia stopped and turned, a bit surprised to see a certain Alicorn she hasn't seen since Twilight and Shining Armor's death. Cadence, she said in a slightly surprised tone of voice. In the flesh, the other Alicorn laughed softly. I'm sorry. Celestia merely smiled before the two embraced in a tight hug. I've missed you, Celestia said during their hug. The castle didn't feel the same without you around. My psychiatrist suggested that I stayed somewhere away from Canterlot to help clear my mind of the events. Cadence chimed, smiling softly. It felt good to be in the arms of her adoptive aunt once more. She really missed being around other ponies besides her psychiatrist. Stay a full year in the woods was exactly what she needed at the time. It allowed her to clear her mind in an undisturbed environment, free from the stress of losing her husband and sister-in-law. You must tell me of your stay in Whitetail Woods, Celestia said after breaking their hug and made their way over to one of the large arched windows. Whitetail Woods, I'm guessing that's a reference toward deer? Well, of course it is, because whitetail's a type of deer. It was definitely calming, Cadence replied. At first, I didn't really want to stay, but over time I got used to being alone. It helped me accept the fact that both my husband and sister-in-law are dead, but... She looked up at Celestia and gave her a small smile. I'll see them again, eventually. For now, I'm going to have to learn to move on with my life and let go of the past. Celestia nodded. That's the Cadence I know, she said fondly. So how are the others? Cadence asked. Luna's still Luna, Celestia laughed softly. Cadence giggled. And how are Twilight's friends? Fine, I assume, Celestia replied. They've grown slightly distant from one another, but still good friends, although her death has affected them greatly. As it did every pony else, Cadence added softly. But let's not dwell on the past so much, Celestia said, placing her hoof on her adopted niece's shoulder. Twilight would want us to move on. It's the least we could do other than finding her killer. Cadence sniffled. Speaking of her killer, did you find him yet? Celestia sighed and shook her head. We haven't had much luck in the last year or so, but I've turned my attention on a different matter, however. Different matter? Cadence repeated. She's been living in Whitetail Woods far too long. Her doctor had given her little news about the outside world in hopes it wouldn't raise her depression more. What's been going on? Celestia fell silent. The last thing she wanted was for Cadence to get involved. It looks as though she's gotten over Shining Armor and Twilight's death, and she intended to keep it that way. If Cadence were to find out about the attacks in Appaloosa, Cloudsdale, and Dodge Junction... Actually, Dodge Junction is just the train station. It's Dodge City that the townspeople live in. She would be more than willing to join whatever plan she had. She had already lost her precious student. She didn't want to lose her precious niece. Princess? Cadence asked, noticing that something was troubling her. The double doors to the throne suddenly slammed open, and a guard came galloping in. Princess! He gasped, quickly removing his helmet and bowing his head before speaking once more. Princess, I've received news that the unicorns you sent to Dodge Junction have returned. What? Princess Celestia asked, sounding and looking surprised. Cadence now felt confused. What is he talking about? She asked. I'll explain everything later, Celestia replied quickly before turning back to the stallion. Where are they now? The guard then swallowed and placed his helmet back on. Ponyville Hospital. Rarity's been severely wounded. ... Please, I need to see her, Spike begged as the nurse at the counter. I'm sorry. She's my friend. I must see if she's all right. I'm sorry. I am terribly sorry about that. I'm sorry, Spike, the nurse sighed sadly, but we cannot allow visitors for her at the moment. She's just gotten out of surgery. The nurse quickly regretted mentioning that when she saw the horrified look that suddenly appeared on the baby dragon's face. Surgery? He cried. For what? Is she all right? Will she live? Please, I need to see her. He then heard the doors open behind him and turned around to see Rainbow Dash, Applejack, Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie, and Sweetie Belle all entering the waiting room. Spiky! Sweetie Belle cried before she ran over and embraced the baby dragon as tears started to rain down her cheeks. Spiky, what's going on? How's Rarity doing? Is she all right? She asked worriedly. I don't know, Sweetie Belle. Spike's voice quivered. The nurse said that they just finished performing surgery on her. The unicorn filly's eyes widened in horror. Surgery? She screamed. For what? Is she all right? Please tell me she's all right. It wasn't for anything serious, the nurse suddenly spoke. The doctors just had to reattach and sew some things up. Reattach and sew up? For what? Fluttershy asked. At least she's questioning, also, because she hasn't had many lines in this story. The nurse really didn't want to have to tell them. Thankfully, the phone started ringing. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to get back to you, all of you, later, she said, politely answering the phone. The group frowned before sighing in defeat. Just then, a pair of double hospital doors opened, and the familiar blue unicorn walked out with a sad expression on her face. Hey, it's Trixie, Pinkie Pie said while pointing a hoof over to her. Trixie, Rainbow Dash called. Huh? Trixie looked up just as the group suddenly surrounded her. From there, they started to bombard her with questions. She felt relatively uneasy and finally yelled, Be quiet! The group finally fell silent as she sighed in relief. Trixie, what happened? Rainbow Dash asked. What happened to you and Rarity? Applejack asked. Are you both all right? Fluttershy asked. Why do you look so beat up? Pinkie Pie asked. Why did my sister need surgery? Sweetie Belle asked. Is Rarity going to be all right? Spike asked. Trixie's left eye twitched as she sighed a long sigh. It's a long story, she said. Trixie then spent most of the morning talking about the events that had transpired during her time in Somber's domain with Rarity. She quickly learned that Celestia had informed all of them about the mission, while Rarity told Spike the night before she left for training. When she finished, it left the others with more questions than answers. While Pinkie Pie was busy eating some cookies that were available in the lounge, classic Pinkie, always there for comic relief, the others were busy talking about, or taking in what Trixie had told them. So that's why you look so beat up, Twilight asked. So that's why you look so beat up? Spike asked, gesturing to some of the bruises she had on her body. Yeah, Trixie replied quietly. When I refused to answer his questions, that's when he took action. But even a simple beating wasn't enough to break the likes of the great and powerful Trixie, she added proudly. Of course. But that's when he attacked me with a nightmare spell, and believed me, it was the most horrible thing I've ever had to endure. The blue unicorn shuddered at the memory and quickly took a sip out of her drink. What would be so bad about a silly old nightmare? Applejack asked as she casually took a drink out of her cup. Trixie surprised every pony when she suddenly slammed her cup down and gave Applejack a terrified look. It was enough to give the Earth Pony chills. You don't understand, she cried as her voice cracked. You just don't understand what I had to go through. It wasn't just any old nightmare. It was my worst nightmare. Something I hope to never ever see again. It was horrible. Just horrible. The blue unicorn soon broke into tears when she buried her face into her arms, sobbing quietly to herself. I would have rather had him beat me to a bloody pulp than have that nightmare again. Don't cry, Trixie, Pinkie Pie said as she gently rubbed her back. You don't have to see that big meanie Sombra ever again. You guys don't know what he's capable of, Trixie whispered ominously. He's no ordinary unicorn. He's the embodiment of evil itself. I can't get his fucking green eyes out of my head. And that smile. I keep seeing his smile whenever I close my eyes. Trixie gripped her head and pulled out her mane a bit. Ooh. Stress hair removal. Anyway. I can't make the images go away. Please, some pony, take them away. Spike said nothing. He knew exactly how Trixie felt. He remembered the cursed door he and Twilight had to endure while looking for the crystal heart. What he saw in there still haunts him to this day. He just prayed Rarity didn't have to go through it as well. Where was Rarity in all this? Sweetie Belle asked. Trixie looked at the filly with sad eyes. I could hear her screams from my cell, she said monotonously. Some pony was torturing her as well, but I don't know who. So, Sweetie Belle swallowed nervously. That's how she got her injuries? I'm afraid so. Poor big sister, Sweetie Belle wailed as she burst into tears. Spike immediately went over and wrapped his little arms around her to comfort her. First Twilight... hold up, let me see. I don't think it says... Okay, never mind, it does. First Twilight, then Brayburn, and now Rarity? Why won't Somber just stop? Fluttershy cried. I hate him! I hate him! I hate him! I hate him! Why can't we all live in a world where there's no evil? Why must this happen to us? We did nothing to deserve this. Nothing! Her friends looked at her in a silent shock. She rarely, if ever, yelled like that. But anger she had been keeping bottled up since Twilight's death was finally unleashed and took a toll on her. I just want everything to go back to the way it was. I want to see Twilight again. I want Rarity to be alright. I want Applejack's cousin to be nice again. I just want everything to be back to normal. Every pony wants to be that, I'm sorry, reading disabilities. Every pony wants it to be like it again, Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash said sadly. But that's life. We can't let Somber destroy us like this. If Somber wants a war, then he can have a war. He's harmed others for far too long. This needs to end, and it needs to end now. The blue Pegasus slammed her hoof on the table, catching the attention of some other ponies nearby. None of the others said a word. Excuse me. A nurse suddenly stepped out of the elevator and approached them. "Rarity is ready to see all of you," she said. ... Rarity could only stare at her reflection in the mirror as she held in her hoof, her eyes fixed on the ugly stitched-up wound on her cheek. It was definitely going to leave a scar, and was beginning to think that she couldn't show her face in public ever again. Of course, Rarity acting all drama queen. What were her friends going to think when they see her like this? What's Spike going to think? She heard the door creak open, and she quickly had her mane cover her cheek. "Big sister!" Sweetie Belle squealed in happiness as she ran in and jumped into her sister's arms. "Sweetie Belle," Rarity said happily, hugging her sister happily. But it didn't end there. Rarity soon found her friends jumping onto her bed and giving one big group hug. Trixie, however, simply stayed by the door and smiled. "We missed you so much." Well, I didn't say that right, but Pinkie Pie sobbed. Well, that's how it was said, but I just didn't say it correctly. I didn't say it in the right pitch, anyway. "Don't do something stupid like that ever again, or else I'll have to tie you to a damn tree," Applejack added fondly. Rarity wanted to say something back, but she found it hard to breathe. Her friends finally released from their death grips, and she took in large gulps of air. Sweetie cocked her head curiously when she noticed her horn was missing. "What happened to your horn, Rarity?" she asked. "Sweetie, that's rude," Fluttershy scolded gently. No, it's fine," Rarity assured her. Spike then noticed the stitches hiding behind her mane, and he gently brushed it away to reveal it more. Rarity, surprisingly, did nothing to stop him. A few of her friends let out soft gasps in surprise. "Who did this to you?" Spike snarled. Rarity tensed. She didn't want to tell them the truth. She still refused to believe that the pony she saw was Twilight Sparkle. Twilight would never do this to her friends. Plus, Spike would be heartbroken if he found out. I can't remember," she lied. Thankfully, they all bought it. She then sniffled sadly. "I'm hideous now," she whimpered. Of course she'd say that. "No, you're not, Rarity," Rainbow Dash said. "Yeah, you're still the pretty Rarity we all know and love," Pinkie Pie added. Rarity smiled sadly before shaking her head. Thanks, you guys. But it doesn't change the fact that I'll have a big, ugly scar on my face and around my cutie marks for the rest of my life. I guess I'll have to put on some makeup to hide it." "No," Spike said firmly. "Don't hide it." "Why not?" Rarity asked. "Because those scars would prove that you're a survivor. If you just choose to hide it, then that'll just make you look like a coward. Don't let some damn scars get in your way. Beauty isn't about your looks, it's about who you are on the inside. And all I see is a beautiful, generous unicorn who was able to survive the horrors of torture." Spike suddenly realized what he said and shyly looked away, but to his surprise, Rarity gave him a kiss on the cheek. "Thank you, Spike," she said softly. "You have no idea how much your words mean to me. I really needed that." End of chapter 22. Ex-Solo Gamer X replied, I don't plan on having Luna captured and tortured." "Me either." Miss Moonshoes Potter replied with, "Me neither," big laugh, "glad you liked it." Wildheart 1997 replied with, "Glad you enjoyed it." Lucifera replied with, "She didn't actually remove Rarity's cutie mark, but after reading your comment, it gave me the idea to imply that she did so." Big laugh. North Gallus 2002 replied with, "I actually have no idea how long the story will be. As for a sequel, I don't plan on making one. There's actually something else I've been thinking of doing, but that's a secret." My Demonic Heart and Soul replied, "Yeah, sorry about that," frown. Princess Midnight Moon, replied with, She didn't actually save Rarity, but she managed to get them both out alive. Alright, on to chapter 23. Note, this occurs 3 days later. Rarity found herself unable to sleep that night. She stayed awake in her room while lying on her side to avoid putting pressure on her wound. Her back was facing the door, so no pony would know she was awake. Patients were supposed to be asleep at this hour. Spike had to return home with Sweetie Belle, and Trixie was allowed to come along since she had nowhere to go for the night. Earlier in the day, sometime around noon, during a visit from Spike, Sweetie Belle and Trixie, Princess Celestia, and surprisingly, Cadance decided to come over. Celestia was horrified when she saw just how wounded Rarity was. It was after she sent Cadance and the others out did Rarity and Trixie explain their experiences and what they learned to Princess Celestia. Celestia looked a bit confused when they brought up the reason why Sombra had the pony's mind for crystals. "I don't recall a species of dragons that only likes crystals in particular," she mused, "but I will keep that in mind. It's important to know if Somber is really attempting to form an alliance with these dragons. It's unfortunate that I don't know much of his family history." The Alicorn was literally at a dead end at this point. Cadance was shocked when she saw the stitched-up gash on her cheek. Thankfully, she didn't need to see the stitches around her cutie marks. All in all, the pink Alicorn, that's the second time I almost called Cadance a unicorn, was happy to see them all. I don't know why I'm trying to call Cadance a unicorn when she was originally a Pegasus. Anyway, the white unicorn sighed softly as she slowly let her eyelids close, hoping for some sleep to come and claim her once more. She placed her hoof above the stitches on her cheek and rubbed it lightly, feeling the woven material embedded into her flesh and skin that would leave a big, ugly scar as soon as they were removed. But after what Spike said to her, she didn't care about how she looked now. She was still Rarity, the element of generosity. "This is all my fault," she suddenly heard some pony say outside her door. The voice sounded like Celestia's. "I should have never sent any pony in. I didn't think." "Stop beating yourself up about it, Aunt Celestia." Cadance stopped her. "At least they're home, alive." "Yes," Celestia agreed, "but that doesn't change the fact that that both of them have been seriously harmed. It'll be a while until they're healed both physically and mentally. But I do want to know who could have tortured Rarity to a point that they actually removed her cutie marks." Okay. I thought her cutie marks were still with her, unless they were removed and Trixie picked them up with them. Either way. "Whoever did that to her is nothing but a horrible, mindless monster, probably worse than Sombra. I'm just glad they weren't killed and had their heads impaled on pikes like shining armor." There was a brief moment of silence and Rarity tensed. I'm sorry for bringing that up," Celestia added. She sounded regretful. "It's okay," Cadance assured her. "You're right. At least they didn't end up like Shiny. But what they went through must have been far worse than what happened to my husband." Rarity couldn't help but feel guilty for not telling the truth, but she just couldn't believe that the pony who had done this to her was Twilight, of all ponies as well. She closed her eyes and thought back to the day where it all began, when Twilight Sparkle was looking at all of them with a determined smile on her face, convincing herself that she would pass Celestia's test. The Twilight she saw now is something else entirely. She didn't want to think about it, but it continued to weigh in her mind. She tried to remove that creepy, almost psychotic grin and those marble-sized irises from her head and replace them with the faces of her friends and family, knowing that only them would drive away the horrible images in her head. "I must find out who those dragons are," Celestia whispered. If what they said about the dragons are true, then we're heading into something very big. You told me that they both mentioned something about Somber being a runaway prince before his corruption, Caden said. Is it possible that he could have been the same prince who vanished from the Obsidian Empire 1,000 years ago? Celestia gave the younger Alicorn a confused look. Obsidian Empire? She asked. I've never heard of such an empire. It was then that Cadence slapped her face inwardly called herself an idiot. That's right, I forgot to tell you and Luna about it. The Obsidian Empire was an empire that rivaled the Crystal Empire. From what Shiny and I learned during our first stay in the Crystal Empire, is that the Obsidian Empire quickly fell soon after their king and queen had died. With their prince missing, they had no pony to lead them, and the empire crumbled after 2,000 years of rule. That's incredible that you know all this, Celestia complimented. There's more, Cadence added. It's said that the Obsidian Empire participated in the Great Draconic War, or Lot Dragonic Keen, as they call it. The language of the dragons, Celestia whispered in surprise. No ponies spoken in Dragonic since the Great Dragonic War. How do you know this? I learned Dragonic from a book in the Crystal Library, but I still haven't completely mastered the language. We must return to Canterlot at once and tell Luna about this. She was the one with the plan, she was in on the plan, and as well, and deserves to know. Perhaps I should have brought her along. Knowing Luna, she would have attempted to kill you if you woke her from her afternoon nap. Cadence laughed softly. Oh yeah, also knowing Luna, she is nocturnal, as am I. In fact, recording right now, it's coming up on 12:40 a.m. Central Time, anyway. As their voices grew distant, Rarity looked over her shoulder and towards the door. Great Dragonic War? Language of the dragons? What in Equestria is going on? ... Okay. Blackfire stood on an outcrop overlooking the lush green land that surrounded the Crystal Empire in the horizon. The Empire itself gave off a soft blue glow underneath the moonlight, making it all the more beautiful. The Crimson Pegasus pressed his black wings against his armored body and grimaced. He hated it. The mere sight of the Empire made him feel sick to his core whenever he had to look at its pathetic blue color, or glittering structures. He could remember the days as a young colt. Unlike the other crystal ponies, he never had that glittery coat and good-looking mane. It often made him a constant victim of bullying and mockery amongst the other crystal foals. He was the one foal who kept to himself and stayed hidden in the shadows. He often found sanctuary within its dark, cold depths. He mostly saw it as a home more than anything else. He felt safe and secured. But even the darkness wasn't enough to protect him from the harshness of reality and everyday life. It wouldn't be for a couple more years in his early days as a stallion would he finally meet a pony who would truly accept him. Sombra. Excuse me. When he first met the Black Unicorn, he seemed like the type who would become friends with easily. He was both friendly and charming. He must admit, he caught the attention of all the young mares around the Empire, but he wasn't the sort who would take advantage of that. That's why so many ponies liked him at the time. When a mare would attempt to get it on with him by inviting him to their home, he would politely reject the offer and go back to reading his spellbook. That was the sole purpose he came to the Crystal Empire, after all. But that all changed one day, when he killed their king and claimed the throne instead. Blackfire couldn't see himself working in the mines. If you can't beat him, join him. And surprisingly enough, he doesn't regret it. He rose up in the ranks at an amazing rate. probably the most devoted follower Somber had. While every pony wondered why the charming unicorn they all thought they knew had changed, he didn't care as much. Somber had shown him acceptance, and not the sort of rejection he was used to getting. So he was more than happy to do whatever he ordered him to do. He spotted a faint silhouette in the horizon and smiled as the raven grew closer and closer. Soon the black bird was perched on his shoulder, happy to finally rest after a 3-day flight from Canterlot. "Hello, old friend." He greeted the bird warmly as he used his hoof to stroke it underneath its beak. What news has Amberleaf given us?" The raven landed in front of him and nudged the scroll it had in its talons forward. The Crimson Pegasus read the scroll silently to himself before his eyes widened in shock. He quickly snatched the scroll up in his mouth and launched himself into the cold mountain air, spreading his black wings while his faithful raven flew beside him. It wasn't long before they found themselves landing in front of the castle entrance. As soon as the double doors opened, he galloped in and sped at a speed that would outrun any marathon runner. He then burst into the throne room and skidded to a halt before the king and queen. "My king, my queen," he panted as he did a quick bow. "I've received a message from Amberleaf." Somber and Twilight looked to one another. Since Trixie and Rarity's unfortunate escape, they've been eager to hear any news from their little spy in Canterlot. Blackfire placed the scroll down before them. Somber then used his magic to bring it closer and unrolled it so that he and Twilight could both read it. It didn't take long until a displeased growl was heard coming from Somber's throat. "They know about the dragons," he snarled, feeling his anger spike and his nostrils flared. He then angrily got off his throne and viciously stomped his hoof down, creating a soft echo throughout the large room. "Send a message to Queen Chrysalis," he said as he rolled the scroll up once more. "Tell her that her services are needed immediately." "Yes, my king," Blackfire said before bowing deeply. As soon as he left the throne room with his raven, Sombra unleashed a roar of rage. It was enough to cause Twilight to flinch in her throne as she watched her husband fume over the dreaded news. "It was supposed to be top secret," he yelled as he paced back and forth. "They were not supposed to know about the dragons. When I find out who fucking told those little whores, I will make sure they suffer a slow and painful execution by me." I'm sorry if I'm causing you discomfort, Fluttershy. But it's okay. Anyway, Twilight decided it would be best if she didn't say anything and allow him to rant. She was very pissed when she found out about Rarity and Trixie managing to escape, and to think she had plans for dismembering Rarity later that morning. She was indeed looking forward to it, to hear her anguished screams and taste her sugary blood once more. Once more? Oh, alright. Never mind, it makes sense now. The thought gave Twilight pleasurable goosebumps. Somber slowly walked back to his throne and sat on it, sighing heavily. Twilight looked over to her husband before getting off her throne and straddled herself on his lap, wrapping both arms around his neck and kissing down his jaw softly. Somber relaxed in his throne and wrapped one of his arms around the small of her back and pressed her closer. "What does this mean now, my love?" Twilight whispered against his chest. A small, malicious smile suddenly curled up on his face, and he chuckled darkly. "It means that we have to push our plans back a few days." Twilight looked up at her king. Her eyes widened and glittered with excitement when she realized what that meant. "You mean we can—" Sombra hushed her with a deep, loving kiss. "Yes," he murmured, "we are." tomorrow night. Twilight threw her head back and laughed maliciously, feeling an adrenaline of excitement kick in as she thought about the plans they had in store tomorrow. Alright, sorry for the short chapter. But anyway, that was actually a pretty good chapter. It was a pretty good length. It at least wouldn't make this video near 2 hours. Anyway, Lucifer replied, "Thanks, I'm really glad you liked the chapter." Miss Moonshoes Potter replied, "I wouldn't exactly say I'm good, but thanks for the compliment." Wildheart 1997 replied, "I'm afraid that won't happen for a while." Princess Midnight Moon replied with, "Applejack didn't know Twilight was involved." And North Gallus 2002 replied with, "I like added little moments like that between the others. I'm glad you liked it." Alright, so chapter 23 over, on to chapter 24. The pink train came to a halt in Ponyville train station with a trail of smoke on its tail. Strongheart and her new friends were standing there anxiously for the doors to open. The buffalo calf felt rather uneasy, however. She was worried about how this Babs Seed filly would think of her once they met. Oh, she incorporated Babs. That's pretty cool. "I'm so excited to see her again," Apple Bloom said excitedly. "It's been so long since we've last seen each other," Scootaloo added. Do you think she brought us any presents?" "I'm sorry," Sweetie Belle asked. "Sweetie Belle," both Apple Bloom and Scootaloo said in unison, giving her a "are you serious" look. The unicorn filly simply giggled in response before receiving a playful punch to her shoulder. Meanwhile, Strongheart shuffled her hooves shyly. "Is something wrong, Strongheart?" Apple Bloom asked when she noticed the uneasy expression on her face. "What? Oh, it's nothing," Strongheart replied with a sheepish grin. But the CMC didn't buy it one bit and quickly surrounded their buffalo friend. "There's no point in trying to hide it, Strongheart," Scootaloo said gently. "Are you nervous about what Babs Seed will think about you once she sees you?" Sweetie Belle asked. Strongheart sighed in defeat and nodded her head shamefully. "What if she doesn't like me because I'm not a pony?" she said. "Don't say that," Scootaloo said. "Yeah, Babs may seem a little scary, like a scary little filly, I'm butchering this sentence. Anyway, yeah, Babs may seem like a scary filly at first, but she's actually sweet once you get to know her," Apple Bloom added. "My big sister told us that she was actually bullied in the city for not having a cutie mark, so that's why she was mean to us at first." "Don't worry, just give her a chance," Sweetie Belle said. The train doors then hissed open, and the silhouette of a rather strong-looking foal appeared in the smoke. When the smoke cleared, it revealed a rather shy-looking earth pony foal with a brilliant gamboge-colored coat and a short brilliant amaranth and brilliant amaranth streaks, or light brilliant amaranth with brilliant amaranth streaks. On her face were some freckles with a pair of moderate spring bud-colored eyes. "Babs!" the CNC squealed happily. Babs Seed gasped happily once she saw her friends, and they happily embraced one another in a gigantic pile of fillies. "I've missed you guys so much," Babs said. I'm sorry. "So did we," Apple Bloom giggled. Soon the group dispersed from the pile and got back on their hooves. "Babs, there's some pony we'd like you to meet," Apple Bloom said before gesturing her hoof over to Strongheart. "This is our latest member of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, Little Strongheart. She's been staying with me and my family for a while now." "Hello. Strongheart replied as she shyly rubbed her left front hoof. Bab's eyes glittered with curiosity and interest. I've never seen you around these parts. I'm not going to try her. I'm sorry, but I tried, but I'm not going to try her accent anymore, she said as she walked up to her to get a better look. Are you a buffalo? Yeah, actually. That's cool, Bab's seed grinned. I've never seen a buffalo before. Only in books and on TV, though. But seeing one in person and up close is so cool. Strongheart perked her ears up in surprise and managed to put up a small smile. Thanks. You're not the first pony who said that to me. Applebloom and the others giggled as they surrounded them. Come on, she said. We have a lot of catching up to do. We have a lot to catch up on. You would not believe what's happened lately. ... So what do you think? Spike asked after he handed Rarity a bouquet of purple and white flowers. When I saw them, I immediately thought of you, so I figured I'd get you some. Spike then played with his fingers nervously as he bit his bottom lip. So, do you like them? Rarity looked up from the bouquet and smiled fondly at Spike. They're beautiful, Spike, she said as she placed them in a vase by her bed. I'm really glad you bought them for me. That's really thoughtful of you. Spike blushed slightly and rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, well, I figured you'd like them. Rarity giggled. So is there anything new I should know about? She asked. Other than the fact that Babs is arrived from Manhattan, nothing much. Trixie's surprisingly doing well in the shop. Ah, and how is Trixie? Spike tensed slightly and seemed a bit hesitant to answer. She still has nightmares about whatever happened to her, he said. Sometimes I would come in and see her either crying or fighting off something that isn't there. I had to get Sweetie Belle to help me wake her up. I honestly don't know if she'll ever recover from what she endured. Rarity silently trailed her eyes down to her lap and thought silently to herself. She knew how Trixie felt. She often found it hard to sleep nowadays because of the images she would see whenever she closed her eyes. Twilight's demented smile was forever etched into her mind like a permanent tattoo. Well, most tattoos are permanent, save for the commercially available ones which are squirt-on temporary, but whatever. She actually shook away those thoughts and concentrated on Spike's visit. She was glad to have at least some pony to talk to. She also found herself growing more attached to the baby dragon than ever before. I hope we're not going there, because then that's bestiality. Anyway. How about you? Is there anything new about yourself? Nah, I'm still the same old Spike every pony loves. Rarity giggled again and fondly patted Spike's head. Oh, Spike, I don't know what I'll do without you. ... I heard about what happened to your friend. I wish her the best of luck in her recovery. Rainbow Dash smiled at the white stallion walking beside her. Thanks. I'll tell her that on my next visit, she said. Star Knight smiled back. Rainbow Dash couldn't have been more lucky to have come across Star Knight during a flight over Ponyville. She trusted him, to be honest. He was a great pony to talk to during dark and depressing times, and he would always be there listening. That's what she liked to see in ponies. Listen first, ask questions later. There are rumors going on in Canterlot that there could be a spy amongst our ranks, Star Knight said. How so? Rainbow Dash asked. Ponies often see a black bird flying to and from Canterlot Castle every 3 days with something in its talons, but no pony has ever attempted to approach it. How long has it been coming there? 3 months or so. It's really hard to say. But what does this have to do with the rumor of there being a spy amongst all of you? Rainbow Dash cocked one of her brows up curiously and waited for an answer. That's the thing. It's only a rumor, Star Knight replied. Any pony could say that there's a spy amongst us. With the shit that Somber's been causing and all, it's difficult to say who's good and who's evil. Half of my colleagues just want to get into the action already. Rainbow Dash sighed softly when she heard this and shook her head silently. If only they witnessed what happened in Cloudsdale. What they had to endure there. Sometimes during the night, Rainbow could hear the anguished screams of the soldiers that died there playing in her head like a never-ending tape stuck on replay. Well, if it's stuck on replay, then it is never-ending. Anyway, she moved her eyes over to Star Knight slightly and caught a glimpse of a jagged scar that formed where the stitches attached to his wings had been. You know, Dash, Star Knight said, this may sound easy for me to say, but you need to let it go for a change. Not quoting the song. I'm not quoting the song. Rainbow Dash snapped her head over to the Pegasus and gave him a scoff. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. A mischievous smirk appeared on Star Knight's face when he suddenly poked Rainbow Dash's side, catching her by complete surprise as he zoomed ahead of her. Let's see if you can catch me, he called. Rainbow Dash's eyes narrowed and a competitive grin stretched itself across her face. Oh, it's on, she said before picking up speed. Before she knew it, she suddenly found herself a few feet from Star Knight, who was pumping his wings as fast as he could. The white stallion looked over his shoulder and smirked when he saw her. He picked up speed and flew a couple more feet ahead of her. Shit, Rainbow Dash cursed under her breath as she pumped her wings faster. She's never felt this much competition since trying to stop Little Strongheart and her herd from stealing Applejack's tree. Yep, I remember that. She then grinned when she found herself getting closer to Star Knight, just mere inches from his flank. But Star Knight had a few tricks up his sleeves. Without warning, he took a sharp nosedive, surprising Rainbow Dash and causing her to slow down a bit. The white stallion closed his wings around his body as he picked up speed. Feeling the cool wind hit against his face in a frozen blast, Rainbow Dash growled in frustration before doing a nosedive herself. Soon they were side by side. Star Knight looked over to Rainbow Dash and gave her a wink before spreading his wings out and suddenly gliding upwards. Rainbow Dash performed the same action just as easily. He's teasing me, she thought to herself. Both Pegasi flew mere inches off the ground at lightning speed. They flew through the busy streets of Ponyville and left a few surprised ponies behind. They eventually reached the large clearing outside of town. From there, Dashie took Star Knight by surprise and suddenly tackled him to the ground. Both were laughing as they rolled across the grassy ground in one another's grasp. When they stopped, Star Knight was hovering above her. Boy, you weren't kidding when you told me you were good at flying, the white stallion huffed. Rainbow Dash gave him a tired laugh. Yeah, when I say something, it's always the truth. I've noticed that. They both laughed softly, feeling completely exhausted from their little match. Star Knight opened his eyes and froze when he looked deeply into Rainbow Dash's eyes. Rainbow Dash cocked her head slightly and blinked. Is something wrong? She asked. No, Star Knight breathed. Nothing's wrong. It's just what? I've come to notice that you have beautiful eyes. Oh. Wow. I don't know if this was intentional, but that's a reference to the Rainbow Factory. That is the last sentence. Not exactly, but that's the last sentence in the Rainbow Factory. Anyway, Star Knight whispered, almost in a dreamlike state. Rainbow Dash was unaware of it, but her face was beet red when he said that. She brought her hooves close to her chest and shyly looked away from the stallion, feeling a bit embarrassed when she heard him laugh gently before she rolled over and laid beside her in the grass. I think I said some of that wrong, but you know what I meant. It's nothing to be ashamed of, he assured her. It's the truth, although you've probably been told that many times before. I have, actually, she admitted. But yours is probably the most sincerest I've ever received from a stallion. Star Knight smiled, and he affectionately cuffed Rainbow Dash underneath his chin. Underneath her chin. I'm sorry. You're truly something one of a kind, Rainbow Dash. I don't think I've ever met a mare such as yourself. Your friends are lucky to have some pony like you with them. Yeah, Rainbow Dash whispered. For the first time since Twilight's death, she felt something grow inside her, a warm and fuzzy feeling. She was beginning to think she was falling in love again. Hopefully not in that way. ... Cadence stared out the window of her old bedroom within Canterlot Castle. It felt odd, after almost a year of isolation, to be sleeping in a proper bed with civilization, or within civilization once more, but she did enjoy being around the company of other ponies, especially her adopted aunts. Since her conversation with Celestia, she's begun to dwell deeper into the research towards the long-lost Obsidian Empire. Unfortunately, the library had no books detailing on either the Obsidian or Crystal Empire. The only library that she knew that would have those books is the one in the Crystal Empire. But she wasn't to return to the Empire yet. It would only bring back memories of that day, the day every pony's lives were changed forever. The princess sighed softly and turned away from the window and made her way over to the door. Celestia was currently busy, or perhaps Luna was available to talk with. As she walked down the empty halls to Luna's chambers, Cadence allowed her mind to drift back to the days as Twilight's full sitter. A small smile laced her lips as she remembered the cute secret hoof shake they both created during their foalhood. Oh, she really missed those good old days. The alicorn then stopped when she spotted a white pony just beginning to move away from the throne room doors. "Excuse me," she called. "Eep," the pony squeaked in surprise, jumping slightly and immediately backing away when she saw Cadence. "I'm so terribly sorry," she stammered. "Oh, no, it's fine," Cadence said gently as she approached the shaking pony. "Is something the matter? Were you waiting to ask Princess Celestia something?" "What? Oh, no, I was just, The pony's eyes darted from left to right, darted to the left briefly, before looking back at Cadence. "On my way to the library. I'm afraid my curiosity got the better of me." She wanted to finish it with a nervous laugh. Cadence narrowed her eyes slightly in suspicion, but simply went along with it. "I've never seen you around here. What's your name?" "Amberleaf," she replied. "Well, Amber, if you're ever lost, don't be afraid to ask me. I've lived in these castles since I was born." I don't think she did, anyway. I've never read the book on Cadence's origin. All I know is she was a Pegasus before turning alicorn. Anyway. "Sure," Amberleaf replied before she turned away and quickly walked down the hall. Cadence felt slightly uneasy around the pony, as though something wasn't right about her. She walked down the steps and peeked into the throne room. There she found both of her adopted aunts talking about what Rarity and Trixie had said. Cadence slowly backed away and looked in the direction where Amberleaf had disappeared in. Celestia didn't tell her that they had a crystal pony who managed to escape from Somber's clutches. But remembering what the conditions were like out there, she found it a little hard to believe. A young mare being able to escape without much injury, let alone not getting chased, sounds a little suspicious to her, and the rumors of a spy being in Canterlot didn't help either. She needed to speak with her aunts about this, although it may sound a bit too soon, but she needed to point out the possibility that Amberleaf could be a spy, and not some innocent victim. "Ah, Cadence," Celestia said when she spotted the pink alicorn entering the throne room. "You're just in time. I was telling Luna about our conversation last night. Aunt Celestia, Aunt Luna, we need to talk." Caden said. Oh? About what? Celestia asked. I just ran into... Hold up. That crystal pony you told me about, Cadence explained. Normally I'm not one to judge another by their appearance or how they look, but there's something about this one that just makes me uneasy. Celestia and Luna looked at one another before looking back at their adopted niece. How so? Luna asked. I saw her near the doors a few minutes ago, she said. It looked more like eavesdropping than anything else. Perhaps she's just waiting for me to be finished, Celestia said. I thought that too, but what about the rumors of a spy being around Canterlot? That certainly doesn't help with what I'm saying. Luna tilted her head to the side slightly. Are you implying that Amberleaf could be a spy for Sombra? She asked. There's a strong possibility. This sort of stuff always happens in war. The enemy would send one of their own to act like some innocent civilian or soldier who's changed their ways. But when they're actually listening to important conversations like this, as a matter of fact, she could be listening to us as we speak. The entire throne room fell silent at that moment. But there's not a war, Celestia said before she turned her over to one of the windows and watched the sunset outside. Not yet, that is, she whispered. Meanwhile, listening from the double doors, Amberleaf cringed and quickly made her way back to her room. Once inside, she locked the doors just for safe measures and went over to her desk. From there, she took out a sheet of paper and a quill and proceeded to write down everything she heard. If what Cadence believes is real, then she's fucked. End of chapter 24. Alright. Zelfra1234 replied, You'll find out, in probably the next chapter or the one after that. Kleptomaniac replied, Better to be safe than sorry, but thanks. Princess Midnight Moon replied, Hee 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 hee, and thanks. A turtle replied, Big laugh, lol. Wildheart 1997 replied, Thanks. Northgullis 2002 replied, You'll just have to wait and see. Now, unless I'm just coming in these late, I don't know what they're saying. Final chapter for this video. Warning. Violence and death. Not for the fate of heart or mind. Nurse Hale, having spent an entire day giving the guards present in the Crystal Empire checkups, was just cleaning up her stuff for the night when she heard a soft groan behind her. Her ears perked up when she snapped her head over to the soldiers to see Flash Sentry regaining consciousness. Well, I thought we were done with him. Good Celestia of the Sun, she whispered before she quickly went over. Flash Sentry, can you hear me? Nurse, the young stallion murmured as he opened his eyes for the first time in 3 months. His vision was nothing but a blur. Nurse Hale was nothing but a large blur of cherry red mixed with cream. Flash Sentry started to panic slightly. I can't see. Why can't I see? Calm down, Flash, Nurse Hale said gently, but firmly as she gripped his hoof. You've been in a coma for 3 months. It'll take a while for your vision to settle. 3 months? It only felt like seconds. The Pegasus relaxed in his bed and sighed. Nurse Hale chuckled softly and gently stroked his slightly lengthened mane. You just wait right here and I'll let the others know you're awake. Okay. Flash Sentry closed his eyes and relaxed as he regained all of his senses. He began to recognize the strange scent of oils and other medicines of the medical bay. Yeah, those smells are actually one of the reasons why I don't like hospitals. They stink. Anyway, he heard some guards talking just outside his window, standing across the street from the building. Slowly he regained his memory of what happened previous to the coma. His eyes suddenly snapped open while his ears perked up in alarm. He shot up in bed and frantically tossed the blanket aside. Nurse Hale stopped and turned to see what Flash was doing, and was alarmed when she saw him attempting to get out of bed. Flash Sentry! She gasped. gasped as she quickly ran over to push him back in bed. You just woke up. Your body won't be able to handle you walking. You don't understand, he cried. I have to see Commander Winddancer immediately. It's very crucial that he knows about it. Just stay here and I'll get him for you, Hale said sternly as she finally managed to hold the Pegasus down. Don't do anything funny. I'm not afraid to use a sedative on you if I have to. Yes, ma'am, Flash Sentry sighed. This wasn't like him, normally, but he must tell his commander what happened. The image of that day played back like a silent film, and to think it's only been 3 months. He soon broke into tears when he remembered seeing Twilight, snuggled up by Somber's side and looking perfectly happy. He choked and gagged a bit on his tears, his heart racing the harder he cried as his tears hit the white bed sheets like rain. ... Applebloom woke up from the sound of whimpering beside her. The filly fluttered her eyes open tiredly and looked around her room to find Winona, the family dog, looking out the window, whimpering, pawing at the glass gently and nervously. Winona? Applebloom yawned as she crawled out of bed and trotted over to the anxious dog slowly. Is something wrong? Do you need to go potty? She asked. The dog merely whimpered in reply and continued to paw at the glass, her eyes fixed on the mountains beyond. Applebloom looked in the direction and blinked curiously. I don't see anything wrong, she said. The both of them then jumped when they heard a crash downstairs. Winona's ears perked up in alarm, and she immediately ran out of the room and went downstairs. Winona! Applebloom called quietly before going after the dog. Winona, no! We need to wake up Applejack or Big Mac. When she reached the bottom of the steps, however, she screamed at what she found. Lying on the floor in a puddle of her own blood was Granny Smith. Wow. I'm just taken back by that. Not faking, I'm just taken back by that. Anyway. A knife taken from the kitchen sticking out of her chest. Winona was whimpering and gently nudging the old mare in an attempt to wake her up, before sitting by her side and letting out a mournful howl. Granny, no! Applebloom wailed as she fell to the floor and sobbed. Applebloom? She heard her older sister's tired voice call from downstairs. What in tarnation are you doing up this late? Do y'all have any idea what time it is? Applejack's voice trailed off when she saw their grandmother lying on the floor. Granny? Granny! Applejack cried as she quickly ran over to her grandmother's side and frantically checked for a pulse. Her heart quickly sank when she didn't feel any. No, she whispered, tears beginning to brim in her eyes. AJ? Applebloom? Just what the hey are you two doing down here? Big Macintosh, just like Applejack, never finished what he was going to say as soon as he spotted their grandmother on the floor. Granny Smith! He cried. She's gone, Big Mac, Applejack said tearfully. She's gone. Big Macintosh's ears flattened against his skull sadly and he pulled both his sisters in for a hug. Granny! Applebloom bawled against her brother's warm body, burying her face in his fur. Applejack and Big Mac cried the hardest. They haven't cried this hard since the death of their parents and finding out what happened to Brayburn a few weeks back. Winona suddenly raised her head in alarm and snapped her head over to a corner of the room. She quickly got into a defensive stance and growled dangerously. What's wrong, Winona? Applejack sniffled. There was a sudden loud screech, and a full-sized creature lunged out from the darkness. Winona immediately tackled it back, snarling and snapping her jaws at it before letting out a terrified whimper. Winona! Applebloom cried.